And next, I want to talk about the concept of the ecological fallacy. So let me, again, draw our attention to some Wikipedia pictures here. Another good set of pictures from Wikipedia. So right here, let me just make my face bigger. There we go. Right here, this is a map of the US 2020 presidential election, something that's in all of our recent memories. And so you can see again, and if you were paying attention, you remember that both Pennsylvania and Georgia were big contested states as the votes were coming in. And of course, this is one of the most politically contested elections in any of our lifetimes. You might not remember the 2000 election, but I do have memories of the 2000 election. That was pretty bad too. But the 2020 election, a bad one in terms of political, contestation. Anyway, but you see that Pennsylvania and Georgia both have lighter blue colors as opposed to states like New York and California, which have darker blue colors, Hawaii as well. Those darker blues just represent a higher proportion of the state that voted Democrat, and the darker reds represent a high proportion of that state that voted Republican, that voted for Trump versus that voted for Biden. So this is another good example of a choropleth map. And so the ecological fallacy is another problem that can arise with the use of choropleth maps. And again, choropleth maps are used so commonly for a reason. Again, we talked last time about how choropleth maps can be used to represent the median wealth across the world in different countries. And now here we can see an example of a choropleth map being used to represent a political map. Choropleth maps are extremely common in representations of political maps, electoral maps. I actually, quick side note, I have a couple of friends who work for the organization Ballotpedia. So for any of you interested in politics and interested in maps and statistics and elections, Ballotpedia, check that out as a possible job after college. But side note there. Now the ecological fallacy is, let's take Oklahoma for instance, and Oklahoma is a pretty dark red right there. And the ecological fallacy would be when someone looks at Oklahoma and assumes that every county in Oklahoma voted for Trump and was majority Trump, or that every individual in Oklahoma was majority Trump. That's not true. This is just talking about the mean votes in Oklahoma. The average voter, Oklahoma just got, more Trump votes than Biden votes, but there were still some Biden votes, and there were even some counties within Oklahoma that went Biden. So let's actually take a look here at this map. This is broken down by county, and so it's much more granular than when it's broken down by state like this. Now this is still a choropleth map, but in this case, with this choropleth map, because it's broken down by county, a smaller unit than the state, it's harder to make the ecological fallacy, at least when we're talking about the county level, right? And so Oklahoma is right about here. It's hard to actually tell because I don't remember the counties of Oklahoma, but you can see that I think this is right here. This county is an example of one in Oklahoma that went. It's a little bit on the, it's more purple. A lot of people in that county maybe voted for Trump, but it looks more blue and therefore more Biden. We can say the same of Texas. Texas is a sort of light red state. People think of it as very conservative and very Republican, but in reality, Texas is a state with a lot of people who have immigrated from Latin America living in Texas, and it's also got it's a state with a lot of big cities, and so people that lean more Democrat in big cities are residing in Texas. That makes it lighter red in color. And we can see that when we look at the Texas counties, we see a lot of deep red counties, but we also see a lot of deep blue counties as well, like where the cities of Austin and Dallas and Houston, for instance, are. And so to say that every county in Texas voted for Trump would be an ecological fallacy, because that's just not true. And so another problem, the ecological fallacy is just another problem that happens when we aggregate data in the way that we do when we use choropleth maps. That doesn't mean choropleth maps are always bad. And again, I want to remind you, choropleth maps are used very commonly for a good reason. They're a good tool, but it's important to keep these potential pitfalls in mind when we're thinking about how to properly use and interpret choropleth maps.